Good evening, everyone. Today, I want to talk about something we've all felt but might not have named those moments when life feels heavy, chaotic, even overwhelming, and we wonder, why is this happening to me? I call these the pressure points of faith, and I believe they are signs God is testing us right before a breakthrough. You're doing everything right. You've prayed, worked hard, shown up, and tried to be patient. Yet nothing seems to be happening. It feels as if the door you're waiting for is not only closed but locked, and you don't have the key. That space of waiting can be one of the most uncomfortable and disheartening places to exist. It's a place where doubt creeps in, where you start to question everything, your abilities, your worth, and even your faith. You might wonder, is God even paying attention? Why would he leave me here stuck while I'm trying so hard to move forward? This waiting room of life is not a place of punishment, it's a place of preparation. Waiting is a tool God uses to refine us, to strip away distractions, and to help us focus on what truly matters. The waiting isn't a sign that you're forgotten. It's a sign that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating something bigger than you can imagine. But let's be honest, waiting is hard. It requires a patience we often don't feel like we have. And in a world that tells us we should always be moving, achieving, and progressing, being still feels almost unnatural. It feels like failure. The reality, though, is that waiting is not passive. It's active. It's an invitation to lean into faith and trust the process, even when you can't see the end. Imagine a seed buried in the ground. For weeks, maybe months, there's no visible sign of growth. The seed is hidden in the dark, surrounded by dirt, and undergoing a transformation that no one else can see. But during that time, its roots are growing deeper and stronger, preparing to support the plant that will one day break through the surface. The waiting room of life is much like that. It feels dark and isolating, but it's where the roots of your character, faith, and resilience are growing. During this time, it's natural to feel restless and tempted to force things to happen. You might think, if I just push a little harder or try a different angle, maybe I can make something work. But sometimes the harder we push, the further we move away from the breakthrough we're longing for. When God has you in a season of waiting, it's because the timing isn't right, not for you, not for the people around you, and not for the purpose he's preparing you for. This is where trust becomes essential. Trust that God knows what he's doing, even when it doesn't make sense. Trust that the waiting isn't wasted. Trust that the silence you feel isn't a sign of abandonment, but a chance to tune into what God is whispering to your heart. Often, it's in the waiting that we discover what we truly value, who we really are, and what kind of faith we carry. But waiting isn't just about trusting God, it's also about trusting yourself. It's about believing that you are worthy of the dreams in your heart, even when they feel far away. It's about refusing to give up on the vision, even when it feels easier to settle. The waiting room can feel like a test of endurance, but it's also an opportunity to strengthen your resolve. In this season, small acts of faith can make all the difference. Maybe it's choosing gratitude, even when you're frustrated. Maybe it's taking one small step toward your goal, even when you're unsure of the outcome. Or maybe it's simply sitting still, acknowledging the discomfort and saying, I trust you, God, even when I don't understand. The waiting room isn't forever. Breakthroughs don't come on our schedule, but they do come. When they do, you'll look back on this season and realize it wasn't wasted. You were being prepared for something bigger, something more beautiful than you could have imagined. And every moment of waiting was part of that preparation. There comes a moment in life when everything familiar begins to shift. The routines you've relied on, the relationships that once brought you security, and even the plans you've carefully crafted start to crumble. It's disorienting, even frightening, as though the foundation you've been standing on is giving way beneath your feet. The collapse of your comfort zones can feel like a loss, a betrayal, or even a punishment. But what if this isn't destruction? What if it's divine redirection? When your comfort zones begin to collapse, it's easy to resist. We cling tightly to what we know because it feels safe, even if it's no longer serving us. The familiar, however flawed, is less scary than the unknown. Yet God often uses discomfort to move us toward growth. Growth rarely happens when we're sitting in the ease of our routines. It happens in the stretching, the challenging, and the unfamiliar. Think of a bird in a nest. The nest is warm and secure, a place to rest and be nourished. But there comes a time when the bird outgrows the nest. If it stays, it will never learn to fly. So the mother bird pushes the fledgling out, not because she's cruel, but because she knows it's the only way the bird will discover its wings. The collapse of your comfort zones is much the same. God isn't pushing you out to punish you, he's preparing you to soar. Still, the process feels anything but graceful. When comfort zones fall apart, they often leave us feeling untethered. The friendships we thought would last forever begin to fade. The job we believed was our dream starts to feel stifling. The plans we were so sure about unravel. In those moments, it's tempting to hold on tighter, to fight the change, and to mourn what we've lost. But what if the collapse isn't happening to you, but for you? The truth is, we outgrow things, we outgrow roles, relationships, and even versions of ourselves. When God calls us to step into something new, He often has to shake up our comfort zones to get our attention. It's not because He wants to see us struggle, but because He sees the bigger picture. He knows that staying in the nest will keep us from experiencing the fullness of what He has planned. This process of leaving the familiar behind is uncomfortable. It requires letting go of control and stepping into a place of trust. Trust that the collapse of your comfort zones isn't the end, but the beginning. Trust that God's plans are greater than your own. Trust that even when you can't see the path that's being laid out in front of you. During these moments, it's important to pay attention to what's being revealed. When comfort zones collapse, they often expose areas where we've been settling or holding ourselves back. Maybe you've been staying in a job that doesn't align with your purpose because it feels safe. Maybe you've been avoiding a hard conversation in a relationship because it's easier to keep the peace. Or maybe you've been ignoring a dream in your heart because pursuing it feels risky. When the familiar begins to fall away, it's an invitation to reevaluate. To ask yourself, what am I being called to step into? What do I need to leave behind? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. The collapse of comfort zones also teaches resilience. It forces us to adapt, to grow, and to lean on our faith in ways we never have before. It's in the discomfort that we discover our strength, and in the uncertainty that we deepen our trust in God. One day, you'll look back on this season and see it for what it was, a turning point. You'll realize that the collapse of your comfort zones was the catalyst for your growth, the start of something extraordinary. The discomfort you feel now is temporary, but the transformation it leads to is lasting. God is not breaking you, He's building you. Trust the process, even when it feels messy. What's on the other side of this collapse is worth every moment of discomfort. Rejection is one of life's most painful experiences. It can leave us feeling unworthy, unseen, and deeply discouraged. Whether it's a dream job slipping through your fingers, a relationship ending, or an opportunity you've worked tirelessly for being denied, rejection can feel like a personal attack on your value. You pour your heart into something, believing it's meant for you, and then you're met with a no. It stings. It makes you question yourself, your abilities, and even God. You might find yourself thinking, why does this keep happening? Why am I not good enough? But here's the truth: rejection is not a reflection of your worth. It's often God's way of redirecting you to something better suited to your purpose. It doesn't feel that way in the moment, though. Rejection feels final, like a door slamming shut in your face. But what we often fail to see is that rejection is just a part of the process, not the end of the story. Think about the times you've been rejected in life. At first, it felt devastating, didn't it? But looking back, you can often see how those moments shaped you. Maybe the job you didn't get led you to a position that was a better fit. Maybe the relationship that ended made space for someone who truly understands and loves you. Or maybe the closed door forced you to explore a path you wouldn't have otherwise considered a path that ultimately brought you closer to your purpose. Rejection teaches us resilience, even if we don't want the lesson. It shows us how to keep going when the world tells us to stop. Every rejection carries a message, and often that message is redirection. It's as if God is saying, not this way, not this time, I have something better for you. It's not a denial of your dreams, but a reshaping of them into something more aligned with who you are meant to become. Still, the process of facing rejection after rejection is exhausting. It's hard to keep believing in yourself when the world seems to keep saying no. The key is to shift your perspective. Instead of seeing rejection as a dead end, start seeing it as a signpost. Ask yourself, what is this teaching me? What is God preparing me for? Rejection often comes with lessons in patience, humility, perseverance, and trust. Rejection can also reveal hidden truths about ourselves. Sometimes we pursue things not because they're truly right for us, but because they feel safe, expected, or convenient. Rejection forces us to pause and reconsider. It's an opportunity to ask, is this really what I want? Or is there something deeper I'm being called to? In these moments, it's crucial to lean into faith. Trust that God sees the bigger picture, even when you can't. Trust that His plans for you are greater than your own. It's hard to do this when you're in the thick of rejection, but faith is often strongest in the waiting, in the unanswered questions, and in the times when life doesn't make sense. Take heart in the stories of people who faced rejection before their breakthroughs, authors whose manuscripts were turned down dozens of times before becoming bestsellers, entrepreneurs who failed repeatedly before building successful businesses, people who thought they'd lost everything, only to find something far greater. These stories are not exceptions, they're examples of how rejection can be a stepping stone to success. When you face rejection, it's natural to feel like giving up. But remember, rejection is not the end, it's a detour. It's a refining process that helps you become stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your purpose. Each no you encounter is getting you closer to the right.
Yes.
So the next time rejection comes your way, don't let it define you, let it refine you. Take the lessons, trust the redirection, and keep moving forward. One day you'll look back and realize that every rejection you faced was a necessary step towards something greater than you ever imagined. Rejection isn't the final word, it's just the beginning of a new chapter. There are moments in life when you feel like you're being stretched beyond what you thought you could handle. The challenges keep piling up and you wonder, why is this happening to me? Why does it feel like the harder I try, the more I'm being tested? It's as if the very things you've always relied on, your strengths, your talents, your resilience, are being pushed to their absolute limit. It's uncomfortable, exhausting, and even discouraging. But what if this isn't about breaking you? What if it's about building you? When your strengths are being stretched, it's often because you're being prepared for something bigger than where you are right now. Growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. Muscles don't grow without resistance. Diamonds don't form without pressure. And you don't become the person you're meant to be without being tested and stretched. Think about it, every skill, every strength you possess was developed through some kind of challenge. You didn't learn patience by having everything go your way. You didn't build resilience by never facing adversity. And you didn't gain wisdom without making mistakes. The same principle applies when your strengths are being stretched now. It's not a punishment, it's preparation. But let's be real when you're in the middle of it. It doesn't feel like preparation. It feels like being overwhelmed, like you're barely keeping your head above water. You start to wonder if you're enough, if you're capable, if you're strong enough to handle everything being thrown at you. And that doubt, that's part of the process too. It's in those moments of doubt that you have the opportunity to dig deeper, to discover reserves of strength and courage you didn't know you had. Sometimes the stretching happens because you're being called to grow into a role or responsibility you didn't think you were ready for. Maybe it's a new job that feels overwhelming or a family situation that demands more from you emotionally than you feel you can give. Maybe it's a dream that requires you to step out in faith, even though the path forward feels uncertain. Whatever it is, the stretching forces you to expand your capacity, to rise to the occasion, and to trust that you are capable even when it feels impossible. Other times, the stretching is about refining your strengths. It's not just about getting through a tough season, it's about learning something new about yourself in the process. Maybe you've always thought of yourself as strong and independent, but now you're in a situation where you have to ask for help. That's not a sign of weakness, it's a lesson in humility and connection. Or maybe you've always been the problem solver, the one everyone turns to in a crisis, and now you're learning how to set boundaries and say no. That's not failure, it's growth. The stretching also teaches you to rely on something greater than yourself. When you're at the end of your strength, that's often when you're most open to asking for God's help. It's in those moments that you realize you don't have to do it all alone. Strength isn't just about what you can do on your own. It's about knowing when to lean on others and when to lean on your faith. As hard as it is to believe in the moment, the stretching won't last forever. And when it's over, you'll look back and see the ways you've grown. You'll notice how much stronger you've become, not just in your abilities, but in your character. You'll see how the challenges you faced shaped you into someone more resilient, more compassionate, and more capable than you were before. So if you feel like your strengths are being stretched right now, know that it's not happening by accident. You're being prepared for something greater. Trust the process, even when it's hard. Keep showing up, even when you feel like giving up. And remember, growth isn't supposed to be easy, but it's always worth it. One day you'll look back and realize that this season of stretching was the season that transformed you into the person you were always meant to be. There are times in life when you feel invisible, like you're doing everything right, but no one seems to notice. You pour your heart into your work, your relationships, your faith, yet it feels like no one is listening. No one is paying attention. You show up, but it feels like you're a shadow in the room, unseen, unheard, unnoticed. That feeling of being invisible can be one of the loneliest experiences, leaving you questioning your worth, your purpose, and whether anyone truly values what you bring to the table. But here's something important to remember: feeling unseen and unheard doesn't mean you are. It often means you're in a season of growth and preparation, one that may require more patience, more trust, and more vulnerability. It may feel like you're in the shadows right now, but God is working behind the scenes, crafting something in you that the world isn't ready for yet. And sometimes being unseen is a necessary part of your journey toward a greater purpose. When you're overlooked, it's easy to spiral into self-doubt. You begin to question your value. If no one sees me, does that mean I'm not important? If no one hears me, does that mean my voice doesn't matter? These questions, though natural, are misleading. The truth is, you matter. Your voice matters, your efforts matter, even if they aren't immediately recognized. Think about all the times you've been overlooked in the past. Those moments are not a reflection of your worth, but rather the limited perspective others may have. Sometimes people don't see your potential because they are too focused on what's in front of them. Sometimes they don't hear you because they are distracted by their own noise. But none of that changes the fact that you are valuable. When you feel unseen and unheard, it's important to reflect on why. Often it's because you're in a season of preparation. The world may not see what you're becoming, but that doesn't mean God isn't shaping you for something greater. It's in those quiet, seemingly unnoticed moments that God often works most profoundly. Think about how he works in the hidden places, how he used the shepherds in the fields, how he called David from the fields to become king, how he spent years preparing people in obscurity before bringing them into the spotlight. This season of invisibility is not punishment, it's protection. The world isn't ready for your full potential yet, and maybe you're not ready for the platform that is coming your way. Maybe the quiet is where you are learning to rely on God's voice instead of the approval of others. Maybe it's where you're learning to stand firm in your worth without needing validation from external sources. During these times, it's essential to remember that your worth is not defined by the recognition of others. Your worth is innate. It is rooted in who you are, not in what others see or hear. The way God sees you is not based on your achievements, your social media following, or your success. It is based on his love for you, which is unconditional and unchanging. In these moments, lean into that truth. If you feel unseen, ask God to help you see yourself as he sees you, to find strength in the knowledge that you are enough, even when the world doesn't acknowledge it. And when you feel unheard, remind yourself that your voice has power, even if no one is listening in the moment. Sometimes it's in the silence that we find our true strength and our truest voice. As you wait for others to see you and hear you, don't forget to see and hear yourself. Acknowledge your own growth, your own efforts, and your own worth. Celebrate the small victories and be proud of the progress you've made, even if it feels unnoticed. The people who are meant to hear your voice and see your light will do so in the right time. You're not invisible. You're in the process of becoming. And the world will see you when it's time. In the meantime, trust that God sees you, he hears you, and he is preparing something extraordinary for you. Keep going even when it feels like no one notices. Your worth is not measured by the attention you receive, but by the immeasurable love that is already within you. There are times in life when you're called to let go of the very thing that has brought you comfort, joy, or security. It might be a relationship, a dream, a job, or even a part of your identity. You feel deeply connected to this thing, and surrendering it seems like an impossible ask. It's as if the thing you love has become a part of who you are, and releasing it feels like you're losing a piece of yourself. But in these moments of surrender, there is often divine purpose in what God is asking of you. Surrendering what you love doesn't mean that what you love is bad or that it's wrong to care for it. It means that God is inviting you to trust him more deeply, to let go of the things that you've placed your hope in apart from him. It's a call to deepen your faith, to recognize that nothing in this world can fulfill you in the way that he can. It's not about losing what you love, but about gaining something far more valuable, your true alignment with God's plan for your life. When you're asked to surrender something you love, it feels painful. It might feel like you're being asked to give up a part of yourself, and in some ways, that's exactly what's happening. You're being asked to release your grip on something that's holding you back from experiencing the fullness of God's love and purpose for your life. The thing you love may be good, but it might not be the best for you right now. And in order to grow, to move forward, and to step into the destiny God has for you, sometimes you have to let go of what you've been holding on to. This doesn't mean that God wants to take away all the good things in your life. Often what he's asking you to surrender is a piece of your own control. We tend to cling tightly to what we love because it gives us a sense of security. But when you hold on to something too tightly, it can become an idol. It can take the place of God in your heart and life. Surrender is not about losing something, it's about freeing yourself from what's holding you back from truly experiencing God's plan for your life. This call to surrender often comes in seasons of change. Perhaps you've been holding onto a dream for years, working tirelessly toward a goal that you thought was part of your calling, only to find that it's not coming to fruition. Or maybe a relationship that once brought you joy has started to feel unhealthy, but you're afraid to let go because you're not sure who you'll be without it. These moments are where God's invitation to surrender becomes most clear. He's not asking you to give up what's good. He's asking you to trust him more than you trust your own plans. In surrendering what you love, there's a deeper invitation to trust. Trust that God knows what's best for you, even when it doesn't feel like it in the moment. Trust that he has something better in store, even if you can't see it yet. Trust that he will provide for you, even when you're uncertain of what comes next. This trust doesn't come easily. It requires faith that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for your good. It's a process of releasing control and leaning into the unknown, knowing that God is there in the uncertainty, guiding you. Surrendering what you love also invites a new level of intimacy with God. It's when we let go of our tight grip on the things of this world that we make room for him to fill us with something greater. This act of surrender isn't about loss, it's about gaining more of him. The things we love can never truly fulfill us the way his presence can. In surrender, we find freedom to trust him fully, to walk in his purpose, and to experience the peace that comes from knowing he holds our future. If you're in a season where God is calling you to surrender something you love, take heart. It's not about sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice. It's about trusting that God has something greater in store for you. Let go of what's holding you back and watch as he replaces it with something better, something that aligns with his perfect plan for your life. The surrender may feel hard, but the joy, peace, and purpose that follow are far greater than anything you could imagine.